I can never forget that night. When I was just 8 years old, my cruel parents screamed at me and threw me out of the house. When I tried to force my way back in, my mother exploded with rage and punched me so hard that I stumbled and fell onto the road. But what my father did next was even more shocking, something I could never have imagined. Hello, my name is Mia Anderson, and I am 23 years old. But this story does not start today. It started 15 years ago, when I was just 8 years old. That was the night I learned that some parents don't love all their children equally. That was the night I lost my family. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, in a house that was more like a museum than a home. Everything was polished, expensive, and perfect, except for me. My parents, Jonathan and Catherine Anderson, were highly respected attorneys, known for their discipline, intelligence, and success. In their world, there was no room for weakness, failure, or mistakes. They demanded excellence in everything, especially from their children. I had a younger brother, Adam, who was their pride and joy. Adam was everything they wanted: smart, charming, and effortlessly talented. Every time he achieved something, our parents showered him with love, praise, and attention. He was the golden child. And me? I was just the extra one, the mistake they didn't know what to do with. No matter how hard I tried, I was never good enough. If I got a B on a test, my parents would look at me like I had personally disgraced them. If Adam got an A, they would throw a celebration. If I needed help with homework, they told me to figure it out myself. If Adam needed help, they hired the best tutor money could buy. They acted as if he deserved success, and I deserved nothing. I spent my childhood chasing their approval, believing that if I worked hard enough, if I tried my best, they would finally see me, finally love me the way they loved Adam. But nothing I did was ever enough. I was invisible when I succeeded, and a failure when I fell short. Then, when I was 8 years old, everything changed. It was the night I finally understood that no amount of effort would ever make them love me. The night they made a choice. The night they decided I didn't belong in their perfect family. It was a cold evening when my life, as I knew it, came crashing down. I had just returned from school, my backpack weighing heavily on my shoulders, but the weight in my chest was far heavier. That day, I had taken a crucial math test. I had spent countless nights studying, reading through my notes over and over again, hoping that this time I would make my parents proud. But despite my efforts, when the results came in, I had only managed a C+. I knew what that meant. As soon as I stepped inside the house, I could hear their voices from the living room, loud, sharp, and full of disappointment. My hands clenched around my test paper as I stood frozen in place, listening. "She's an embarrassment." My mother's voice was sharp, each word cutting through the air like a knife. "We have given her everything, every opportunity, and she still fails us." My father's voice followed, colder than ever. "We've done our best to shape her into something worthwhile, but she keeps proving she's not meant to succeed." My stomach twisted painfully, and I felt my breath hitch. They were talking about me. Again. "She's lazy," my father continued. "No matter how much we push her, she never rises to the occasion. She is not the kind of child we can be proud of." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I tried. I had done everything I could, worked harder than ever, but it was never enough. Then, my mother's voice cut through the silence in a way that made my blood run cold. "We can't keep doing this. Maybe it's time for her to leave." I felt the ground shift beneath me. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I was 8 years old, she couldn't mean that. But she did. Later that evening, after dinner, my parents called me into the living room. My father sat on the couch, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. My mother stood beside him, her expression unreadable. Adam was nowhere to be seen. He never had to witness these moments. "Mia, we've talked about this," my father said in a measured, emotionless tone. "You aren't meeting our expectations. And quite frankly, we're tired of trying." A chill ran down my spine. "Trying what?" My voice barely came out, a whisper of confusion. My mother didn't hesitate. "Trying to fix you," she said flatly. If you can't live up to what we expect, then maybe you don't belong here. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled at my sides. Where would I go? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My father exhaled, completely unaffected by my fear. Figure it out, he replied. Something inside me shattered. Panic clawed at my chest. Please, I begged, my voice breaking as tears streamed down my face. I'll do better. I'll work harder. Just don't send me away. I stepped forward, reaching for my mother's hand, desperate for any sign of warmth, any flicker of hesitation. But instead, she punched me. It happened so fast that I barely had time to react. Her fist connected with my cheek, the sharp impact sending a shockwave of pain through my skull. My head snapped to the side, and I stumbled, nearly collapsing onto the floor. For a moment, the world went silent. My heart pounded in my ears. My skin burned where she had hit me, the sting sinking deep into my bones. I clutched my cheek, my fingers trembling as I touched the tender, swelling skin. I looked up at her, tears in my eyes, pain and betrayal written all over my face. But my mother? She didn't even flinch. Get out, she said, her voice low, sharp and final. I turned to my father, searching for some kind of protest, some sign that he disagreed with what had just happened. But he wouldn't even look at me. That was it. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter. The moment I finally understood that they never wanted me in the first place. The sting on my cheek deepened as I stood there, frozen in disbelief. My mother had punched me. My father had let it happen. And now they were throwing me away like I was nothing. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to sob in front of them. Crying wouldn't change anything. Begging wouldn't make them love me. They had made their decision. Without another word, I turned and ran to my room. My hands shook as I grabbed a small bag and stuffed in whatever clothes I could find. I didn't know where I was going or what I was supposed to do. I just knew I had to leave. As I zipped up the bag, I hesitated for a brief moment, glancing around my room. The walls were bare except for a few old drawings from when I was younger. The bed I had slept in for years suddenly felt like a stranger's. This house had never felt like home, but now I realized it never would. With my heart pounding, I gripped the strap of my bag and walked toward the front door. My mother was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, watching me with cold indifference. My father sat in his usual chair, flipping through a newspaper as if nothing had happened. Adam was still nowhere to be seen. I swallowed the lump in my throat. One last chance. Maybe if I looked at them long enough, if they saw the pain in my eyes, they'd change their minds. Maybe my mother would regret hitting me. Maybe my father would tell me to stay. But they didn't. My mother reached for the door handle and swung it open. Leave. I stepped outside, gripping my bag tightly, the cool night air sending shivers through my body. My feet felt heavy as I walked down the steps, my mind screaming at me to turn back, to do something, anything, to make them want me. The door slammed shut behind me. I was alone. As I wandered into the streets of Seattle, a sense of dread settled in my chest. The streetlights flickered above me, casting long shadows on the pavement. The sound of distant traffic, laughter from nearby homes, and the occasional barking of a dog only made my isolation feel heavier. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have a plan. All I had was the clothes on my back, a swelling cheek, and a heart that felt like it had been shattered into pieces. Hours passed as I wandered aimlessly, exhaustion creeping into my bones. The cold wind bit at my skin, and the hunger in my stomach was a painful reminder that I hadn't eaten since dinner. I wanted to collapse on the sidewalk, to give up, to let the world swallow me whole. And then I heard a familiar voice. I stood under the dim glow of a street lamp, my arms wrapped around myself in a desperate attempt to stay warm. My feet ached from walking, my stomach twisted with hunger, and the sting of my mother's punch still throbbed against my cheek. I felt completely and utterly lost. The streets of Seattle stretched endlessly before me, unfamiliar and unwelcoming. I had nowhere to go, no idea what to do next. My parents, no, those people weren't my parents anymore, had made it clear that I was no longer part of their lives. The realization sent another wave of hopelessness crashing over me. And then, in the middle of my despair, I heard a voice. Mia? I froze. My breath hitched. The voice was warm, familiar, and full of concern. I turned around, my heart pounding, and saw a woman standing a few feet away. It was Nancy, my aunt. For a moment, I couldn't move. I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating or if this was some cruel trick my exhausted mind was playing on me. But as she stepped closer, her eyes scanning my face, taking in my swollen cheek and the bag slung over my shoulder, I knew this was real. "Oh my God, Mia, what are you doing out here?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain what had just happened? How could I tell her that my own mother had punched me? That my father had watched it happen and said nothing? That they had thrown me away like garbage? Nancy must have seen the pain in my eyes because, before I could even try to speak, she stepped forward and wrapped me in a hug. It was the first real hug I had received in years. The warmth of her embrace unraveled something deep inside me. I had been holding back my tears, refusing to cry, refusing to let my parents see how much they had hurt me. But as Nancy's arms tightened around me, I broke. A sob escaped my lips, then another, and before I knew it, I was crying uncontrollably into her shoulder. She didn't say anything. She just held me, letting me cry, letting me fall apart. When I finally pulled away, my breath hitching, she cupped my face gently, her fingers brushing against my bruised cheek. Her eyes darkened with anger. "Did someone hurt you?" she asked, her voice sharp. I hesitated, but I couldn't lie. "It was my mom," I whispered. "She hit me, and then they told me to leave." Nancy inhaled sharply, her jaw tightening. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to march straight to their house and give them a piece of her mind. But instead, she took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, as if forcing herself to stay calm. "Come with me," she said, her voice gentler now. "You're safe now, Mia. I promise." She took my hand, and for the first time that night, I felt like I wasn't alone. Nancy led me through the quiet streets, her grip firm, yet comforting. My legs ached, my body exhausted from the endless wandering, but I didn't care. For the first time since I left that house, I felt safe. We arrived at her apartment, a small but cozy place nestled in a quiet part of the city. The moment she unlocked the door and guided me inside, I felt an overwhelming sense of warmth, something I had never felt in my own home. There were soft blankets draped over the couch, family photos on the walls, and the faint scent of vanilla candles lingering in the air. "Sit down, sweetheart," Nancy said gently, guiding me to the kitchen table. "You look exhausted." I obeyed, my body too drained to argue. I watched as she moved around the kitchen, heating up a bowl of soup and pouring me a glass of water. She didn't ask me 100 questions. She didn't demand explanations. She just took care of me. As she set the bowl in front of me, I hesitated. My own mother had never done this. Not when I was sick, not when I was sad, not ever. "Eat," she said softly, "and then we'll talk." The first spoonful of soup warmed me from the inside out. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I started eating, finishing the entire bowl in minutes. Nancy sat across from me, watching me closely. "Now," she said, folding her hands together, "tell me everything." I swallowed hard, my eyes dropping to the table. Where could I even start? "They never wanted me," I finally said, my voice hollow. "No matter what I did, it was never enough. Adam was their favorite. I was just there. A failure. A disappointment." Nancy's expression darkened, but she didn't interrupt. "I got a C+ on a math test today," I continued. "And that was the final straw. They said I wasn't worth the effort anymore. My mom..." My fingers brushed against my swollen cheek, the memory still fresh. "She hit me. Then they told me to leave." A tense silence filled the room. When I finally looked up, Nancy's face was tight with anger. "I always knew your parents were cruel," she said, her voice shaking. "But this is unforgivable." Tears welled up in my eyes again. But this time, I wasn't just sad. I was angry too. How could they do this to me? How could they sleep peacefully, knowing they had abandoned their own daughter? Nancy reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Listen to me, Mia. You're not a failure. You're not worthless. You are smart and strong, and you didn't deserve any of this. A lump formed in my throat. I had spent my whole life trying to prove my worth to my parents. But sitting here, in Nancy's warm, safe kitchen, I realized something. I didn't need to prove anything to them. They had made their choice. And now I would make mine. I wasn't going back. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully. There were no hushed arguments outside my door, no overwhelming sense of failure pressing down on my chest. Just the soft glow of Nancy's hallway light filtering into the guest room and the warmth of a blanket wrapped around me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I felt safe. The next morning, Nancy made breakfast, placing a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. It was strange, someone caring for me without conditions, without expecting perfection in return. As I ate, she sat across from me, sipping her coffee. You can stay here as long as you need, she said simply, as if it wasn't even a question. I hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty creeping in. I don't want to be a burden, I whispered. Nancy scoffed, shaking her head. You are not a burden, Mia. You never were. Her words settled deep in my chest, unraveling years of self-doubt. I had spent so long believing I was unwanted, that I wasn't good enough. But maybe the problem was never me. Maybe it was them. With Nancy's support, I started to rebuild my life. She helped me transfer to a new school, where I could start fresh without the constant weight of my parents' expectations dragging me down. At first, it was hard. I still flinched at raised voices, still felt like I had to prove my worth to everyone around me. But Nancy never let me forget my potential. You're smart, Mia. You can do anything you set your mind to, she reminded me every single day. I studied harder than ever, not because I was desperate for approval, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable. Slowly, I started excelling in school, finding confidence in my own abilities. Meanwhile, my brother, Adam, remained in that house, still trapped under our parents' suffocating expectations. I barely spoke to him during those first few years, but I worried about him. I had escaped, but he was still stuck. One evening, I sat on the couch scrolling through my school assignments when my phone buzzed. My heart nearly stopped when I saw Adam's name on the screen. Adam. Hey, can we talk? I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave that part of my life behind, and never look back. But another part of me, the part that still cared, despite everything, knew that Adam was reaching out for a reason. I took a deep breath. Mia. What's going on? Little did I know that text would be the start of something I never expected, a shift that would change everything. The message from Adam sat on my screen, glowing in the dimly lit room. For a moment, I hesitated. Why now? He had never reached out to me before, not when I was struggling under our parents' impossible expectations, not when I was thrown out, and not in the years since. But something told me this wasn't just a casual text. I typed back quickly. Yeah, we can talk. What's going on? His reply came almost instantly. Adam, can we meet? I need to get out of here for a bit. I could feel the urgency in his words. It wasn't like Adam to sound unsure. Not the golden boy, the favorite child who always had everything handed to him. But something had changed. An hour later, I met him at a quiet coffee shop near Nancy's apartment. As soon as I saw him, I knew something was wrong. The confident, polished brother I remembered looked exhausted. His eyes were sunken, his posture slouched, and his fingers tapped anxiously against the table. He looked up as I sat down, his expression wary, almost guilty. Hey. I nodded, keeping my voice neutral. Hey. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. Then, finally, Adam sighed and rubbed his temples. Mom and Dad are suffocating me, he muttered. They won't let me do anything that doesn't fit their idea of success. I told them I wanted to go to a performing arts school, and they lost it. They said I was wasting my potential. I frowned. What do you mean? I thought you wanted to follow in their footsteps, law school, corporate success, all of that. Adam let out a hollow laugh. That's what they wanted, not me. For the first time, I really looked at him, not as the brother I resented for being the favorite, but as someone who had been trapped just like me. He might not have been thrown out like I was, but he had been just as controlled, just as smothered by their expectations. I can't do this anymore, Mia, he admitted, his voice raw. I don't want to wake up every day feeling like I have to be perfect just to be worthy of their approval. A pang of recognition hit me hard. I knew that feeling better than anyone. I took a deep breath, then stopped trying. Adam looked up at me, confusion flashing in his tired eyes. You don't owe them your life, I said firmly. If you don't want the life they're forcing on you, then leave. Start over. You have a choice, Adam. His jaw tightened. It's not that easy. I still live under their roof. They pay for everything: school, clothes, food. If I leave, I have nothing. I leaned back in my chair, considering his words. He wasn't wrong. It was easier for me because Nancy had taken me in, given me a second chance. Adam had no one else, except me. I met his gaze. Then come stay with me. He blinked, taken aback. What? I mean it, I said. If you really want out, then leave. I'll help you figure things out, the same way Nancy helped me. You don't have to do this alone. Adam swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists on the table. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he nodded. Okay. And just like that, everything shifted. For years, I had thought Adam was the lucky one, the one they cherished, the one they wanted. But now I realized that, in his own way, he had been just as trapped as I was. The difference was that I had already broken free. Now it was his turn. The night Adam left our parents' house, the tension in the air was almost suffocating. He had packed a single bag, just like I had years ago, but unlike me, he had the choice to leave. He wasn't being thrown out, he was finally taking control of his own life. Nancy and I waited for him outside in her car, parked a few houses away from our childhood home. My stomach was tight with nerves, knowing our parents wouldn't let him go without a fight. But Adam was determined. He had spent years being their perfect son, their golden child, and now, for the first time, he was choosing himself. 15 minutes later, the front door swung open, and Adam stepped out onto the porch. Mom and Dad were right behind him. Even from a distance, I could see the fury in their expressions. Nancy's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Are you sure he's ready for this? She murmured. I exhaled slowly. He has to be. Adam walked down the steps, his movement stiff, tense. My father stood at the doorway, his arms crossed, his face twisted with barely contained rage. If you leave now, you don't come back, my father warned. Adam hesitated. I could almost feel his internal battle. Years of conditioning. Years of being the son they favored, the one they molded to their liking. Leaving meant giving all of that up. But then he took another step forward. Then I won't come back. My mother let out a harsh laugh. You're making a mistake, Adam. You're nothing without us. I felt my nails dig into my palms at her words. I had heard those same kinds of sentences before. Words meant to strip us of our confidence, to make us believe we were powerless without them. But Adam didn't shrink away. He turned back to them one last time. No, Mom. I was nothing with you. And with that, he walked toward us. The moment he got into the car, Nancy hit the gas, pulling away from the curb. I turned to look at Adam, expecting him to show some sign of regret, but instead, he exhaled in relief. For the first time in his life, he was free. That night, Adam stayed in Nancy's guest room, the same one that had become my safe haven all those years ago. He was quiet at first, processing everything, but as we sat together at the kitchen table, something about him seemed lighter. I should have done this sooner, he admitted, staring at his hands. I gave him a small smile. You did it when you were ready. That's all that matters. Nancy patted his shoulder. You'll figure things out, Adam. And you don't have to do it alone. I nodded in agreement. We're in this together. For years, I had thought my family had been broken beyond repair, that I would never have a sibling who truly understood what I had gone through. But sitting there with Adam, watching the way his confidence was starting to rebuild itself, I realized that maybe we weren't broken. We were just finally breaking free. The days that followed felt surreal. Adam was finally free from our parents' grasp, but he was still adjusting to his new reality. At first, he was quiet, withdrawn. He spent a lot of time lost in thought, processing what had happened. But little by little, I started to see the real him emerge. He played his guitar more, something he had been forced to give up under our parents' strict rules. He started talking about music school again, about writing songs, about finally doing something for himself instead of for them. It was strange seeing him without the weight of their expectations crushing him, but at the same time, it was incredible. One night, we were sitting on Nancy's small balcony, watching the city lights when Adam turned to me. "Do you ever think about them?" he asked hesitantly. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tracing the rim of my mug. "I used to," I admitted. "For years, I wanted them to regret what they did. I wanted them to realize their mistake, to come find me and beg for forgiveness." Adam nodded, looking down. "And now?" I thought about it for a moment before shaking my head. "Now, I don't care anymore." And I meant it. I had spent so much of my childhood and teenage years wanting something from them that they were never going to give me. Love, approval, an apology. But the truth was, I didn't need it anymore. They weren't part of my life, and I was better off without them. Adam was silent for a moment before nodding. "I think I'm getting there too." We sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the past slowly dissolving into the night air. As the months passed, I poured myself into my studies, determined to make something of my life, not for them, but for me. Adam started working on his music, writing and recording songs with a freedom he had never known before. For the first time, we were building lives we actually wanted. And then, one day, Nancy came to us with an idea that would change everything. We were sitting in the living room, laughing about one of Adam's ridiculous song lyrics when she looked at us thoughtfully. "What if we did something with all of this?" she asked. Adam raised an eyebrow. "With my music?" "No, with everything we've been through," she clarified. "You both know what it feels like to be rejected, to be told you're not enough. What if we created a place for kids who feel the same way?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" Nancy leaned forward, excitement shining in her eyes. "A community center. A place where kids and teenagers who feel lost, abandoned, or pressured by their families can come and just be themselves. No expectations. No judgment. Just support." The idea settled in my chest like a spark ready to ignite. I thought back to the girl I used to be, the child who had been desperate for love, for a safe space, for someone to tell her she was enough. I imagined what it would have been like if a place like that had existed back then. Adam sat up straighter. "We could have music programs, art classes, tutoring. A place where kids can actually do what they love without fear of being told they're wasting their time." Nancy nodded. "Exactly." I met Adam's gaze, and in that moment, I knew we were going to do this. We were going to turn our pain into something meaningful. We were finally going to create the home we never had. Months passed, and what started as an idea became a reality. The Anderson Community Center, named not after our parents but after ourselves, slowly took shape. We secured a small space, raised funds, and built something from nothing. A place where kids could explore their passions without fear, without pressure, without rejection. Every time I stepped inside, I felt a deep sense of purpose. This was what I was meant to do. Not proving myself to my parents. Not chasing their approval. But just when I thought I had left the past behind, the past came knocking. It happened on a quiet afternoon. I was at the community center, reviewing some schedules, when my phone rang. A number I hadn't seen in years. My stomach twisted. I almost didn't answer. But then, curiosity got the better of me. "Hello." A sharp, familiar voice filled the line.
"Mia."
I froze. My mother. It had been years since I had last heard her voice, and yet, just the sound of it made my chest tighten.
"We need to talk," she said.
I clenched my jaw. "We really don't." She let out a heavy sigh. Enough with the attitude, Mia. We've been patient. But this little act of rebellion has gone on long enough. I almost laughed. Act of rebellion? Did she really think I had built an entire new life just to spite her? What do you want? I asked flatly. Your father and I have been thinking about the future, she continued. And we believe it's time you come home. I gripped the edge of the desk. Home? As if they hadn't thrown me out like garbage? As if she hadn't punched me in the face and told me I was worthless? You're getting older, Mia, she went on. You need stability, a real career. That community center nonsense isn't going to sustain you forever. My heart pounded.
She hadn't changed.
Not even a little. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Let me make something very clear to you, Mother.
You're not my family.
You stopped being my family the day you hit me and threw me out into the streets. Her silence on the other end was deafening. I continued, my voice unwavering. I used to dream about this moment, about you realizing you were wrong. But now, I see that you haven't changed at all. And I don't need your approval anymore. I heard a sharp intake of breath. Mia, be reasonable.
No.
You be reasonable, I shot back. I am never coming back to you. I am never letting you have control over me again. You don't get to decide my future. I do. And I choose to live without you. Her voice turned sharp. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it.
No.
I regret ever wanting your love in the first place. And with that, I hung up. That was the moment I knew I was free. The day of the community center's grand opening, I stood with Nancy and Adam, looking at the place we had built together. A place for kids like us, kids who had been rejected, abandoned, or made to feel like they weren't enough. Adam strummed his guitar, a small smile on his face. Mom and Dad would hate this, he mused. I laughed.
Good.
Nancy looped her arms around both of us. You two have done something incredible. I hope you know that. I looked around at the kids walking through the doors, kids who would never have to feel as alone as we once did. I didn't need my parents' love. I didn't need their validation. I had something better. A family who chose me. A life I built on my own terms. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be.